Episode 227 of the Bevan James Eyles Show, an interview with Susan Peirce Thompson. Rightio team, welcome along to episode 227 of the Bevan James Eyles Show, your fortnightly podcast on the behaviours that create a lifetime love of fitness so you can get all the benefits that come alongside it. Welcome to 2022. Let's be honest, most of us are crossing our fingers that by the end of this next 12 months, the idea of COVID will be a thing of the past. Now, I won't put my life on the fact that that may be the case, but I put my hope on the fact that that may be the case. Just got to say, it's been an interesting kind of 18 months, 2 years, hasn't it? And I don't know. I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is the moment where it's not a part of the conversation, because pretty much every conversation you have right now there's some aspect of COVID related to it. And so it would be nice to get to that time when we don't have to talk so much about COVID. But that's not what today's show is about. Today's show, I have an interview with a lady by the name of Susan Peirce Thompson. She is a Ph.D. in brain science or brain stuff you'll talk about later on. But she's actually really into food addiction, and she takes kind of neuroscience into food addiction. She actually created a product called Bright Light Eating. She's had when we recorded this interview, she was about to find out if her third book was on the New York best time seller list. So she may have 3 books, the best time selling books. Either way, she's got 2, and she's got a new book that just came out recently. She's also got a weight loss, or it's not really weight loss, it's more for people who suffer with food addiction. It's called Bright Line Eating. And we touch on it in the interview. And what I really love about this interview is Susan has a very colourful life, and I love the fact she doesn't beat around the bush around it, and there's just some really, so basically we speak, I don't know, maybe 40-50 minutes. The first 2/3 of it is just talking about her life, because it's very fascinating, and you're about to find out. Talk about overcoming adversity to change your life. It's pretty phenomenal. And then obviously she studied and became a doctor or a PhD, and then now moved on to create a product that's helping lots of people with food addiction. And so we talk a little bit about what is food addiction and what are really good ways to manage that. So it's a really cool, insightful interview in lots of ways. It's going to be coming up really soon. The only thing I want to talk about before we get into the interview with Susan is just like I'm really proud of it. It's a silly thing to be proud of, but it's something I'm quite proud of. So on New Year's Eve, we went to, unfortunately, my wife's father passed away last week, so it's been a very sad time, and it's been a different kind of Christmas for my wife and myself, because we've been dealing with her father's sickness, and sadly he passed away last week. But on New Year's Eve, we've got a couple of friends who we hang out for a lot, and they had some, just kind of like a barbecue at their place on New Year's Eve, and it was quite nice just to have a moment where we stepped away from the big life stuff that we were going through, and it was actually really nice for my wife because it's been such a consuming time for her. So we went around and hung out with some mates, and we're the kind of people who can just have fun. We don't, we don't need the lubricant to have fun, if you know what I mean. Like we don't need to drink to have fun. And we basically, at about 9:30, we put some music on, and we were doing some karaoke, and we're dancing away, and we're just having a really good night. And one of my friends, Kate and Jeff, they were one of our friends, they had their kids there, and they brought a friend of one of their kids to this kind of barbecue. And as Kate was driving home, her daughter's friend turned to her and said, oh my God, Bevan was so drunk when you guys were dancing and having fun. And Kate cracked up laughing because she goes, Bevan doesn't even drink. And the kid couldn't get over the fact that I didn't drink. And I'm just kind of, it's a funny thing to be proud of, but I'm kind of proud of that comment, because I think the ability to have fun and let go is a really good skill to have in life. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they need the stimulant to be a version of themselves they like to be. And I just think that it's like, I know when I gave up drinking, here's a really interesting thing. When I gave up drinking alcohol, one of the most powerful things about giving up drinking of alcohol is not just the damage that you stop doing to your life, particularly for someone like me who was a really bad drinker, is that you have to confront all of the things that you thought you needed alcohol for. And I remember the first time that I had to go out to a nightclub, and I gave it a drink when I was like 20. So, I'm at that age where you're going to nightclubs pretty much every weekend. And I remember going to a nightclub and the idea of dancing, I think probably for the first 4 or 5 times that I went out at that stage in my life, I didn't even dance at all. I just kind of sat on the sidelines and felt a little bit awkward. And then I think eventually one night I kind of, I slowly stepped towards the dance floor, slowly moved in, slowly kind of did a bit of side shuffle, and then eventually I started dancing. And what I quickly realized was that no one's thinking about me. We're just having a good time together. And to be honest, in those environments, most people are pretty drunk. So that, it's really not about you at all. And so it was that whole thing of why even be self-aware, because you're not even in other people's minds, and if you know what I mean. And it was a really good lesson to learn, because it taught me that you can just have fun. Just, if you want to have fun, get up and have fun. You don't need alcohol to have fun. And that was a part of the journey of addiction away from me, was A, stopping the substance, the drugs and alcohol, but B, actually learning that I can be the version of myself without the substance. And so on New Year's Eve, or the next day when Kate told us, this is what this kid said, it was a really cool moment for me, because it was kind of like, it was just that reinforcing of, I know how to have fun, and I don't need anything to kickstart that within me. I can just get up and have fun. And I'm quite lucky, because most of my friends are that way inclined as well. So we just get up and have fun. And so it probably makes it easy for me as well. But it was just one of those random things where it was life reinforcing, something that's pretty cool for me. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Hopefully in your life, you know how to participate in life in a way that's really enriching for you. We're going to get into the interview really soon. I also want to say a big thank you to the patrons of the show. If you want to become a patron of the show, go to bevanjameseyles.com, click on podcast, click on support me. You'll go to the Patreon page, go through the payment process, and then you'll donate some of your money each time I release an episode. And these people are some of the people, you also get a cool nickname. And these are some of the people who are cool patrons. Michael, the Hammer Nook. We've got Renee, the Hawk Hawes. We've got Michael Hardcore OK. Now, I saw Michael walking down the street not long ago, so hopefully you're doing well, Michael. Samuel, Mysterious Man, Melino Weaver, and Donald the Explorer James. These are amazing patrons of the show. So if you want to become a patron and support what I do and the message that I put out there, go to bevanjameseyles.com and just go through that process. Anyway, here's my interview with Susan Peirce Thompson. Right, Tim, I'm very excited to have a Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson on the show today. She's an author, a doctor, a nutritionalist. Are you actually a nutritionist, or are you?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm a brain scientist, actually. I'm a brain scientist. I actually often warn people I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not a medical doctor. So I send people away to
you got the PhD. You are a doctor, but yeah.
Yes.
Hey, so let's start from scratch. So maybe just give us a quick overview about yourself and what got you to where you are today.
Oh gosh, Bevan. Yeah. So for that, I gotta go way back, because what I do today really stems from I help people by teaching them how their brain is blocking them from losing weight, and I came to that because my food and my weight struggles really defined my life for most of my life. And I wasn't a super heavy kid, but by the age of 11, I weighed more than I weigh now. And by the time I was in high school, I was really concerned about my weight. And I started actually doing drugs to manage my eating and to lose weight. And also because I was just a really adventuresome teenager and I was having a lot of fun at the time, but it escalated from there. And, a speed addiction turned into a cocaine addiction, turned into a crack cocaine addiction. This was back in the early 90s. And I dropped out of high school and turned to prostitution and really was in bad shape by the age of 19. Just after my 20th birthday, I got struck clean and sober, which was a miracle. And I haven't had a drink or a drug in 27 years. Which is great, but my addiction just hopscotched from drugs right over to food. And I ballooned up. I was obese by the age of 26. I was obese and struggled all through my 20s to figure out how to lose weight. I had kicked drugs and I could tell that my eating was an addiction. That became very clear to me. And I think having just come out of such intense drug addiction, I was really poised to see how my eating was an addiction. It was very clear to me that it was the same dynamic. But I think because you have to eat, I couldn't figure out
You can't go cold turkey on food, can you?
No, you can't. It's
No.
maddening. It's maddening. It's one of the reasons that food addiction, in my opinion, is the hardest to kick. And so I did 12-step food programs, sometimes with some success, sometimes not. I did end up losing my excess weight when I was 28 years old. I've been in what I call a right-sized body or a bright body for 17 years now, which is an anomaly. Most people who are obese or who struggle with obesity never make it to a normal BMI and then stay there for decades. But I went to school after I got clean and sober. I went to school and did really well and ended up getting my Ph.D. in brain and cognitive sciences from a really top school, and became a psychology professor, taught the psychology of eating. And now I'm an expert in the neuroscience of food addiction. And I teach people how to lose weight by really understanding how addictive food can be. So I have 3 books out, New York Times bestsellers. 2 of them I'm actually waiting, as we record this right now, I'm waiting to hear in about an hour and a half if the 3rd book hit the New York Times bestseller list. So I will find out soon. But 2 of them, the first 2 did. Anyway, so that's my story in a nutshell. That's how I ended up doing what I do.
There's a lot to unpack there. So when you go to the very start, when you're a very young child, and so when you're saying you're overweight for your age at least, was it just so consuming for you at that time? You say you got into drugs, and obviously there's the kind of recreational aspect of it, but really you were just trying to escape? Is that when you reflect back on that time?
I don't think I was trying to escape. I think I was trying to manage my eating. I really enjoyed the appetite suppressant effect of the stimulant drugs that I was doing, and I was partying. I was having a lot of fun. So I was those were the 2 main. And I was really into boys at the time, right? So I was 14, 15, 16 years old. I was getting into flirtations and boyfriends and stuff like that. And I enjoyed not having to think about eating, because it was worrisome how much I wanted to eat, more food than I knew was kind of warranted. I would just keep eating. Yeah.
And so then you go through to kind of to the dark side of that life. What was the epiphany moment for you?
The epiphany moment was I was 20 years old. I just turned 20. It was a Tuesday morning. It was August 9th, 1994. And I only know that because of what ended up unfolding historically in my life. But I was in a crack house in San Francisco, California. I'd been there for days. I was smoking crack at that time for 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a row. Just day turned into night, turned into day, turned into night. And I'd been there all through the weekend, and it was Tuesday morning around 9 or 10 a.m. and I was still there. And my head was shaved, not shaved with a razor, but like buzzed. My head was buzzed. I had piercings all through my tongue and my ears and all over and stuff. And I had a blonde wig on my head. I was, a prostitute at the time. And there was a couple kicking heroin. They were like shaking. Kind of over there. And Bevan, I just had this awakening, kind of. I just, from numbness and monotony, somehow in that moment, I just woke up. Like I just somehow was there, present, awake. And I looked around and I got the full force, the full awareness of my condition and where I was. And then a knowing came. I don't think it was a voice. I think it was a clarity. It was a forceful knowing. And I thought, look at me. I'm 19, I'm 20. I just turned 20. And I'd been a really good student as a little kid. I had dreamt of going to Harvard, and I wanted to be an astrophysicist. And I had all these, I was a super sharp little kid. And sort of what had happened to me kind of really came to me. And then this knowing came. And the knowing was, if you don't get up and get out of here right now, this is all you're ever going to be. And I could sort of feel my life in the future as an endless cycles of drug use. Because at that time, I'd already been through at least 3 major cycles of heavy drug use where I'd quit and I'd gotten back into it. And this was like the 3rd time that I was hitting bottom with these drugs. And so I believed it. I believed I had to get out of there right then. And I looked around, I grabbed my jacket, and I walked out the door. And there were people in that room that I used with regularly, but I didn't say goodbye to anybody. I didn't say anything. I just walked out the door. And I was so shaken by that clarity that, at the time I didn't have a place to live. I wasn't living any place. I didn't have a key to a place to go anywhere. And so I went over to this guy's house that I used to stay with sometimes, this guy Baltazar. I looked him up online recently. He died a while ago. But anyway, he was a billionaire at the time, like a literal billionaire. And he lived up in this penthouse in San Francisco. And I went and I had to clear myself through the security. And I went up, knocked, and he opened the door. And he took one look at me and he just looked like, whoa. He just sort of pointed to the spare bedroom, like, go sleep it off. And so I did. I went and I slept it off. And after a few hours of sleep, I felt better. And I showered, and then I felt way better. And I remember like just putting my pager on my hip. I mean, this is way back in the day when, a call girl would use a pager to, get gigs or whatever. And I remember thinking I was just going to go back out to work that night. But first, I had this date I was going out with this really cute guy that I'd met at a gas station at 3 a.m. earlier that week. And we went out and he said, "You want to go to a meeting?" And I didn't know what he was talking about really. So I guess I agreed. And he took me to a 12-step meeting for drug and alcohol recovery. He was 4 years sober at the time. And he was a sex addict, which is why he'd picked me up. He knew that I was a call girl. And, but he was also 4 years sober off drugs and alcohol. And he brought me to this meeting. There were hundreds of people there. It was a big to-do. It was called Tuesday Downtown in Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And I went to this meeting. I got a 24-hour coin, like no drugs or alcohol for 24 hours. I think I was like barely 24 hours off the crack pipe. And I haven't had a drink or a drug since. I started going to meetings and working the 12 steps. And that was it. It was just a fluke. It was like my moment of clarity came right back to back with this dude taking me where I needed to be. And it just stuck.
And so you're like, it's an amazing story. B, so then you'll kind of wake up, you've realized you've got past the transition moment, but there's a life to rebuild now, isn't there? So what happens from that moment forward? Because you're saying you kind of turn to food. So you obviously had some bad behaviors around how to deal with the stresses of your life. So kind of what happened post that moment?
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, well, first of all, I act as if recovery was just like, perfect, right? But I didn't know anything. I didn't even know where I was in that meeting. I didn't know what the hell that was. And it took me a while to even figure it out. So it was really just by magic kind of that I even stayed clean that first month or two. I didn't even start going to other meetings for like a good 3 weeks. It took a long time for the fog to lift. But I ended up moving back in with my mom, who was going back to school herself in her 40s down in San Jose, California. So I moved in with my mom. I enrolled in community college. Which, I was able to take a test and just get right into community college. So I started taking some college classes. I got a job at a movie theater selling popcorn. I stopped tricking that I never went back to it. I don't think, it's interesting because I was working for an agency and I'd given them a pretty hefty deposit, I think, and I never got my deposit back. I remember that. So it was not like I decided to stop. It was just one day at a time. I never went back to it. I never signed into work again. Yeah. So I left that life behind. I got a job at a movie theater and I did really well at community college. And I transferred to UC Berkeley just a year later And I ended up getting 4.0s at UC Berkeley, majoring in cognitive science. And I spoke at the graduation, like I crushed it at UC Berkeley. And so by then I was starting to have some more skillful habits, but the food at that point had really taken over. And so I was managing my stress around writing college papers and stuff like that with eating. And I remember having some really big binges. I remember there was a Mrs. Fields cookies stand or shop or whatever, like 2 blocks away from my apartment. And I remember, really battling, not wanting to, if I would go there and like, not just get like a cookie, but they were the size of your face, right? These massive America, cookies, right? I'd get like 6 of them, which is like, I don't know, 3,000 calories in cookies or something. I'd get like a lot of them. Anyway, so yeah, I was really struggling with my eating, but I was doing really well academically. And then I went to graduate school. I applied to 5 graduate schools everywhere in the world that at that time, my field was brand new back then. Cognitive science or brain and cognitive sciences, brand new. This was like 1995, 6, 7. So there were 5 schools in the world that had a PhD program in that. And I applied to all of them. I got into all of them. So we're talking Johns Hopkins, San Diego. Anyway, I ended up going to the University of Rochester, which was the best school I thought in the world at that time. I visited all of them and I liked it the best. So I moved out to Rochester. I got a full stipend there. They paid my tuition and they gave me a little bit of money to live on. So I didn't have any debt or anything like that. I started teaching in grad school. So I started, just 2 years into grad school, I started teaching and I loved that even more than research. And still the food. Oh my God. I was doing 12-step meetings and it just wasn't working. It just wasn't clicking the way it did with the drugs and the alcohol. And I just couldn't figure out how to put down the food, like where the boundaries were, or if I did create boundaries myself, I couldn't find that I could stick to them. It was just maddening.
At that time because so you've gone from a place where you're at the lowest of the low and, it's a pretty horrible place in life. And then you kind of have this transition. And I imagine you're building massive confidence and esteem and, because you're doing so well and at such a high level. But then you have this conflict of this one area of your life, which has a massive control over you. So what was that internal battle like at that time?
Bevan, I guess I was used to it because I'd always had sort of that internal struggle in one way or another, right? Yeah. I mean, I think even as a little kid, I procrastinated, I lied, I stole as a little kid. I was an only child. My parents got divorced when I was 4, and so I was alone a lot. I was either with my mom or with my dad, but there was a lot of sort of, I don't know, just kind of sneaking. Like I would be alone and I would do stuff that I know they wouldn't approve of or whatever. And so I think I was used to it. There was an incongruence there. Like I see what you're saying, but it didn't feel that unusual to me. I think I'd always had that. I have a lot less of that now. Recovery it's a very gradual, very progressive thing. And I think I have more congruence in my life now than I ever have,
Why and how?
I think just gradually my brain has healed a lot over the years. Like I just don't need today to scratch the itch of addiction the way I used to. And I've built up a lot more positive, helpful coping mechanisms. So when I'm stressed and I need to cope, like I'll call a friend, I might curl up and read a book for a little bit. I might give myself a bubble bath. Yeah. I might go out for a hike around my house. Like I just don't, like in the past, I would make a big bowl of cookie dough and eat it.
Yeah. So you've developed really healthy ways to deal with your stresses instead of those ways.
But it's taken a lot of years to shed those layers of stressors. And even not that long ago, like 4 years ago or something, I went back to cigarettes again briefly. God bless me. I was outside of a 12-step meeting and there were just a lot of young, good looking people smoking outside. And I think I just felt lonely and I just thought, oh, that would be nice. I just like to go. So I just asked one of them if I could bum a cigarette, and they gave me one. And I just thought that would be it. Like, hello, I like world's expert in addiction thinks the first cigarette will just be one cigarette. Hello.
Yeah.
So
It's funny
now,
because I have a very similar story to yours in the kind of drugs and all the rest of it. And so don't do drugs, don't smoke, don't drink. But my one weakness is Coke Zero. And I have some really strict rules around Coke Zero because I could drink 20 liters a day. But I like having it in my life because it's a reminder of I can't open doors. You know what I mean? Like it's a reminder that, you know, with my Coke Zero, I've got like, there's 2 days later a week I'm allowed to drink it. And if I don't drink it, I have a month off. I've got all these strategies I have and they work really well. And I'm really good at sticking to them. But just
Wait, say this again. You have 2 days a week that you're allowed to drink it?
Yeah.
What are the days? Just curious.
Friday, Saturday. So I'll have as much as I want on a Friday. And if we go out for dinner on a Saturday night, I'll have it as well. And so, and then and my rule is, if you have it any other day of the week, you're going to have a month off. And I'm the kind of person that if I have it any other day of the week, I'll have a month off. So I'll really stick to that rule. And so it works. I manage it really well with those kind of criteria. But it's just a reminder of my life because it is the one thing I have a slight addiction to. But I've, you know, within it, you know, come on, of all the addictions I know. But it's a reminder that I can't open doors. You know, like I can't just have this one night where I get on the piss. I can't have, you know, smoke dope at a party occasionally. You know, like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go 100%. And so there's just, you know, and to understand that and obviously you're very similar in this way that you can't be the person who's outside having just think, oh, let's have a ciggy tonight. It's actually, there's just doors in our lives of people, personality types like ours where you just can't open doors. And to know and under, the good thing with people like us it tends to be that if we can redirect that energy in good areas, we can achieve so much. And that's obviously what you've done, but it's understanding that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And, you know, it's interesting just to know the research. About 1/3 of the population is like us, pretty, you know, high on the addictive susceptibility scale. 1/3's moderate and 1/3 doesn't have any at all. So I really bristle when people say, well, everybody's addicted to something. And I'm like, no, they're not actually. Everyone's got bad habits, you know, but not everybody uses to the point of like going, what am I doing? Like, you know, like I'm doing this with tears streaming down my face kind of thing, right? Or like just like knocking myself on the head going like, I don't want to be doing this anymore. I'm hurting myself, like flagrantly hurting yourself, like past the promise of I swore I wouldn't. Yeah, not everybody has an addiction. And as a matter of fact, there are a lot of people who are very unlike us who absolutely can have a cigarette at a party because they want one. And then their brains will not suggest that they should have one again until the next, you know, 6 months later, you know, they're at a party or whatever and they want to. There's even people who drink coffee, you know, ad libitum, meaning like, you know, whenever, however, but not every day, you know? And I'm like, really? But they do, you know, they don't need it every day. It's crazy.
So going back to your story, so then you're kind of excelling with your studies, but at the same time you're not managing your eating. But so then you figure out your weight journey at least, or your weight management journey at least. So what was the keys to figuring that out? And at the same time, obviously you're doing your studies, so there's obviously a crossover of what you're learning and what you're applying to yourself. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah. So I didn't figure it out myself, the behavioral piece that kind of made it click into place. I found a different 12-step food program that had much clearer, stricter rules around what to eat and not eat. And so the effect of that was that it kind of made it clear, if you will, what the first drink is. You know, suddenly I was really clear. Okay, this bite of food is on my plan and anything else is off my plan. Right. Okay. And with that clarity and the sort of unity in the fellowship about that, I was able to lose my excess weight.
So it gave you very clear guidelines and there's a sense of community around what you were doing.
Yes, totally. Totally. And it worked like a charm. My weight came off really fast. I still have some issues with that fellowship because there's a lot of judgmentalism in it. Okay. A lot of judgmentalism. And I think it can be really harmful for people. So I don't frequently recommend it, which is kind of sad because I think it's what it's what works, right? But that's why I founded Bright Line Eating, was to start something that would work, but have at its foundation, just deep compassion and absolute
empathy.
How would I put it? Like respect for people's self-authorship over their journey. I think that 12-step program had a lot of, I guess the new word is gaslighting, right? A lot of like, oh, well, if you're not willing to go to 3 in-person 90-minute meetings every week because you've got 4 kids and you're single, you're not willing to take your food addiction seriously, and I can't work with you then, right? And it's like, well, that's not actually the situation, that sort of thing, right? So, yeah. So, but for me at the time, it was a godsend. I mean, it really was. And it not only did
and
it
you're a
help
bit of
me
an
get my weight
A-type
off,
personality, so that works with your type of personality.
Yeah, it actually was a really good fit for a really long time. And it was kind of as I wizened a little bit and had kids and you know what interestingly, what the break was for me was years later. I'm talking like 11 years later. That program was, I was a perfect fit for it for a long time. But I started wanting to eat plant-based. And they had a lot of judgmentalism about that. Oh, no, you can't do that, And I was sort of like, well, I feel like it's the healthier path for me. And I do have a body that really prefers it. When I eat meat and dairy, I'm constipated and it's not as good for me. So, so that was the first time that I was sort of like, this isn't, I was getting people telling me that I was, being willful and this and that. I was sort of like, I don't feel like that's what is happening with me. I actually just feel like I'm on a journey with my health that feels empowering. And that ostracization that I experienced over that sort of was the beginning of my realizing like, oh, there's aspects to this community that are really unhealthy. So my husband had seen it for a long time. As a matter of fact, he left me over it for a while because I was working that program with such rigor and fanaticism that he didn't want to be with me. He was like, you're crazy over that program. And I had to kind of.
So did you feel desperately stuck to it? Because, it seems like you're the kind of person who, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it, so you're going to do something 100%.
Yeah.
And and you needed this program at a certain moment. It was very structured, very kind of rules-based, which, you'll follow. And it got you to the place you wanted to get to. So did it was almost like you were bound to it in a way where there was a fear of, if I didn't do 100%, what happens to me?
Maybe. I mean, I was a leader in that program in that I had built up a lot of social capital and, I really liked the respect that I had there. And I had long-term deep friendships there that were very true and beneficial. A lot of identity. And I think, like some religions, right, as well, or whatever, there was a lot of belief structure that was built up. And there was a lot of like, well, I need this and I'll be lost without it. And I am a food addict. And if I, deviate, it's good. So there was a lot of kind of when I left that program, I had to kind of retrain a lot of things. And, I have learned over time that a lot of what they taught was right on, frankly. Food addiction is a beast, and you do have to be pretty, especially if your condition is as far gone as mine is, you have to be pretty on it to recover and stay on track. But anyway, so that's enough about that. At the time, interestingly, I was studying the mind and the brain, but I wasn't yet studying the food addiction piece academically. That would come later. That would come a few years later in one of my faculty appointments as a professor. I started teaching a college course on the psychology of eating, and that ended up sort of leading to me studying it a bunch so that I could teach it well, essentially. Yeah.
What is food addiction? How do you define food addiction?
Food addiction is like any other addiction. Interestingly, it's not. It has some unique features to it. So, like any addiction, it involves sort of consuming a substance to the point of harm, right? Just beyond. And what's interesting about food addiction is it's not just a substance addiction. It is a substance addiction. So we're talking about, in that way, not all foods, but processed foods. Like I distill it down to sugar and flour, but potato chips are in the mix too. Technically, they're not made out of flour, but molecularly, the inside of the white potato, after it's flash fried like that, has the same molecular structure as white flour. So it's whatever. But food addiction also qualifies as a process or behavioral addiction. And that's how you'll often see it classified in a list with things like gambling and watching pornography and internet gaming and things like that. And that's because the process of eating can be addictive as well. And in that way, people can absolutely eat cabbage addictively. I mean, I knew this woman who used to stand in the kitchen. She had a lot of food restriction tendencies too. And she used to like obsessively spend her day eating mushrooms and, lettuce dipped in mustard. Yeah. And she would, eat all day and eat 300 calories or something. And she was out of her mind with food addiction, but she wasn't eating any processed foods at all. Her food restriction part wouldn't let her do that. Anyway, so food addiction is both a substance addiction and a process addiction. And, it has all the hallmark characteristics of addiction, right? A difficult, a history of trying to cut back and not being able to succeed long-term, with all these relapses in your past, and, losing control over how much you consume once you start, and having it interfere with your life, and, sort of narrowing your activities or your whatever due to it, having it cause problems in your life, and all of that. It's all part and parcel of addiction. Even the physiological piece, the tolerance and the withdrawal, we see that with food as well. People, get on my program, Bright Line Eating, and they let go of sugar and flour, and they act like they have the flu for a few days. Like they get headaches and shakes, and yeah, it's terrible. Not all of them, but a lot of people do experience withdrawal. So essentially, that's what food addiction is. I think most people have been eating sugar and flour every day since they were 1 or 2 years old. So people often don't realize how addicted they are until they think about quitting. I should tell you, Mr. Coke Zero, that artificial sweeteners are as bad as sugar, and they're absolutely on the no-no list when it comes to sugar. Artificial sweeteners count and then some. They actually have additional bad things about them. But the sweet taste buds on the tongue have direct connections to the addiction centers of the brain. So it's, the Coke Zero is out for Bright Line Eating purposes. Mm. Yeah.
So then how do you treat food addiction?
Yeah, well, first there's treating the outer piece, and then there's the inner work, right? Because of course we're addicted as a coping strategy ultimately, right? And there's inner work to be done too. But like I learned through hard-won experience, you've got to be clear about what you're abstaining from. So that means creating a very structured food plan. So in Bright Line Eating, it's 4 bright lines. Now, a bright line is a clear, unambiguous boundary that you just don't cross. Okay. So, if your addiction is cigarettes, that's easy. No cigarettes. Yeah.
It's black and white.
It's black and white. With food, the 4 bright lines are sugar. So no sugar of any kind, including artificial sweeteners, including honey and agave and stevia and all that stuff. No flour of any kind. It's not, the issue isn't the type of flour, almond flour, coconut flour, wheat flour. The issue is the processing, right? It's the processing that turns it into a drug. Just like the coca leaves off the coca bushes in the Andes Mountains in South America. You can put them in your cheek and chew them. They're not addictive, but it's when you extract the inner essence and refine and purify it into a fine white powder, that's when you've turned it into a drug. So the issue is the purifying and the refining, the extracting, refining, purifying process that sugar and flour have undergone. That's what makes it a drug. So we abstain from those entirely. And then that handles the substance addiction. To handle the process addiction, we need to put boundaries around our eating. Otherwise, our brain is always suggesting, did you eat enough? How about a little bit more? How about now? How about now? How about now? So eating only meals. So the 3rd bright line is meals. So eating only meals, no grazing, no snacking. And then quantities, so bounding the food consumption, either with like a 1 plate of food rule or like I actually recommend a digital food scale, mostly so that people will eat enough. Otherwise, they won't eat enough, especially not enough vegetables.
Mm.
Yeah. And so then you just start doing that one day at a time, and you start to build up integrity around your food. If you've got weight to lose, you start to lose your weight. You start to feel a lot more energetic, a lot more free. I mean, our research shows, and we've published studies in journals. So after just 2 months of doing this, people's peace and serenity with food has increased, not decreased. It doesn't make them crazy. It doesn't make them obsessive trying to do this. They suddenly feel free and peaceful with their food. Hunger and cravings both go down steadily over those first 2 months, so that at the end of the 2 months, they're like down to almost nothing, like no hunger, no cravings anymore. Our research shows that in those first 2 months, interestingly, people at all ages lose weight equivalently. Now, you probably know that people in their 50s, 60s, 70s report difficulty losing weight, right? Especially around the middle. Well, not in bright line eating. And the reason is that the hormonal changes that make it harder to lose weight later in life, it all has to do with how the class of hormones called estrogens, which both men and women have actually, the estrogen hormones have a facilitating effect on insulin. And when you're young and you have a lot of estrogen is really robust in both men and women when you're young, that makes it so that you can get away with eating junk, essentially, because the estrogen helps your insulin, store and release fat really readily, makes your insulin really sensitive. After you lose your estrogen, though, you lose that get out of jail free card. You can't get away with it as much. But when you stop eating sugar and flour, it basically turns someone who's 50 or 60 or 70 years old into the fat burning body of someone who's 20 or 30 years old. So in our program, people lose weight at all ages equivalently, which is really cool. And then we help people do the inner work so that they feel more socially connected, more in tune with themselves, greater inner peace. We support them in starting to meditate and just take really good care of themselves.
So there is the choosing foods which allow them to move away from the chemicals which would trigger the addiction. And then there's the kind of the rules around eating that help you in a good place. And then there's kind of building a sense of connection around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when someone's successful, what does that look like?
What does it look like when they're successful?
Yeah. Obviously they're going to look better, but what's success? Because the reason I say that is because, and people who listen to my show would have heard me say this in the past. I think one of the biggest problems is there's a lot of people out there who are really healthy who think about food too much. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's like, to me, one of the greatest assets in life is the ability to use your mind to think about things that freedom would think about. And so like for me, it's creativity, it's connecting with people, it's about growing. It's, for me to spend hours of my day thinking about food, to me is a waste of a life.
Totally.
And so,
totally, you and I have that completely in common.
Yeah. And so when you think about what is success, obviously there's this kind of management of the body, but also obviously we're trying to get people to a place where they're not actually thinking about food.
That's right. Totally. Yes. And so ultimately I define success as freeing people up to be the people they were meant to be and to contribute their gifts fully to the world. And so absolutely shrinking down the amount of time that people are thinking about their food or their body or their weight, way down, not to zero, because it takes some thought and some management to sort of still attend to it in a healthy way. But I often say it like this. I say, look, because people are like, well, shouldn't I enjoy my food and stuff? It's like, well, look, yes, but you enjoy a hot shower, but you spend no time thinking about it before or after. You enjoy it and then you get on with your life, right? Like it's a great blessing to have a hot shower. So enjoy your meals 3 times a day, but I don't want you thinking about them before or after, right? Done. Just eat it and move on. It's a gift of the day, and it's just one piece of the day. Like that's great, like a hot shower, right? That's it. But I often say that the person in this world, on this planet, who will solve cold fusion and figure out our energy crisis isn't even working on the problem right now because they're starting their fourth diet this year, right? They're like they're obsessed with what they've eaten or not eaten, whether they're on their plan or off their plan, how many miles, how many calories, how many pounds. They're obsessed.
Yeah.
And success looks like no more of that and back to contributing your gifts fully to the world in whatever way that means to you. I mean, people are so varied and different in what a thriving, flourishing life looks to them. But yes, more activities of flow, more engagement, more connection, more meaning.
So there's often, the person who's a real success when they join these types of kind of programs, and then there's the person who struggles. So what's the difference between the person who's really successful and the people who maybe struggle to get to the end point?
Yeah. I think the biggest difference usually is willingness at the starting gate. So what happens with Bright Line Eating is the system works remarkably well. And when you show up ready to really do it, things kind of click into place. And then I give people a lot of warning and guidance, like don't take it for granted. Don't get complacent. Don't develop false cockiness and think that just because it's gotten really easy, now you can start trying to game the system and, make shortcuts and stuff. If you really just take it as a gift and stay true to it, you could just have this problem solved for the rest of your life and just move on with it already. And the people who really just succeed, they're kind of done when they get to my doors and they're just ready to do that. And the people who struggle, either they're just not at the place to fully surrender to the program when they arrive, or they arrive, they do great, they get the gift, and then they give it back. They decide, oh, I've done so great, I bet I can just, eat cake on this cruise, then I'll just get back on track. And then they start, the cycles of starting and breaking and resuming, and, and so it goes. So, yeah.
Yeah. What's like often, we're very lucky, but that we get to be leaders and we get to help people. But I love to ask people in our position, what's the thing you still struggle with?
I still struggle right now with I'm in a really hard season of life. I got 3 kids and they're 13, and 10, and COVID has been really hard on them, especially the 13-year-olds, like really hard. And, I work a lot, and Bright Line Eating has gotten to a juncture where it needs to get to the next level. And I'm scared about whether I can help it get there. I'm getting some additional help because I'm not a business person, I'm a psychologist. And this movement needs to really grow. It really does. And, how do I do that? We've got 33 employees. It's a lot to manage, and so for me, my biggest struggle is the muchness of it all, I think. I mean, I pray I'm through the worst of it because it's been a really hard few years. But just the muchness of it right now. And, just life is seasons, and this isn't the quiet, easy season.
The deep end swimming season. So who would you, just so to kind of clarify, who is the target market for Bright Line Eating?
The target market for Bright Line Eating is first and foremost anyone who just struggles with their food and their weight and really wants a solution to it, right? So I think we could look around and probably pick out half the population who we might say need Bright Line Eating, right? But Bright Line Eating isn't for everyone who needs it. Bright Line Eating is for people who want it and are willing to work it. And so that could be people who really struggle with their food and their weight. It could be people who don't struggle that badly, but like structured, effective solutions, right? Who are like, look, I got 15 pounds to lose or 10 kilos to lose. And I don't think I have a food addiction problem, but I would rather have a lot of clarity about what to eat and when, and I'd rather have these few pounds or kilos off, and I'm willing to follow a structured plan. So Bright Line Eating is for someone like that too. But the program was really created for people who are suffering, like really suffering with their food and their weight. Yeah. Let me just also say, not necessarily their weight. Research shows that 22% of people at a normal BMI right now test out with full-blown food addiction. So,
because I work in fitness, you see so many people who are unhealthy food.
Right. They're running another 10 miles so they can allow themselves, another cup of non-fat frozen yogurt, right? It's insane. Yeah, totally.
No, definitely. Yeah. And if people want to work with what's give us the plug.
Oh, so easy. Just go to brightlineeating.com. So it's BRIGHT, Brightline, LINE, brightlineeating.com. And we've just totally restructured Brightline Eating. It used to be $1,000 for the first year to do Brightline Eating, and we've just made it $20 a month. It just couldn't be easier. The same program, it's incredible value. It delivers and then some, and it's just so easy to get started now. So just come on in and try it. And if you don't like it within 14 days, just get all your money back, all $20, right? It's just so easy. So just come sign up, just check it out. It's so good. So good.
Okay. And thank you so much. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, guys. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck with it. Hopefully in about 20 minutes from now, you'll find out your book's on the New York US Times seller. The new book is called Resume. And the other two books are called, what are the other two books called?
I actually have them right here, I think. Yeah. So the first one is Brightline Eating.
Okay.
The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free, Brightline Eating. And then the second one is the official Brightline Eating cookbook, which has amazing recipes in it. And then the third one is for people who have experienced chronic relapse, Resume, REZOOM, to indicate speed, zoom, do it fast, get back on track.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Hey, thank you so much for your time. It's been really awesome talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bevan. It's been great to get to know you. Take care.
Great. Right, Tim, hopefully you got a lot out of that interview. Again, as I said before I started playing the interview, what a fascinating life, eh? Like, it's a life lived, and really cool to see that transition of turning a life around in some massive ways. Like, it's hard to comprehend being in that moment she was in, and now looking at, sometimes in life, hopefully, I hope you have this kind of, I really hope in your life you have these moments where I never thought I could be this person, or I never thought I could have this life that I have. Like that younger version of you, hopefully if you're very young and you're listening to this, hopefully you'll wake up 20 years from now and think, jeepers creepers, I never thought this was possible in some area of your life. And it's such a really cool, because I guarantee if Susan at that early moment when she was in that really broken place could fast forward to where she is right now and seeing the impact that she can have on the world, and she's New York Times best-selling author, you're creating a product that's really helping lots of people, pretty high-level person in that moment. Maybe she never saw that, and it's a really nice thing to have in life, is that moment where you go, wow, you wake up and it's like, actually I'm in a place that I never thought was possible. And I guarantee one thing that everyone who has that moment has is they have continuous development in their life. And probably the people who get stale and maybe just kind of day by day and don't really progress are the ones who maybe just don't spend that time on development. Now, I can't be 100% sure about that, but I definitely think that if you commit to the evolution in your development in your life, you're going to be, way more successful, or there's a higher chance that moment will hit you moving forward in your life. So if you want to check out Susan's work, I'll put all the link in the show notes for this show today. Just a couple of things before I wrap things up. I've got to say I'm pretty excited because my book's going to be out in about another 2 or 3 months from now. It's getting to the last stages. We're doing book cover design right now, so we're kind of going through those last few steps of the process. I'll be letting you guys know all about this. I'm really excited about the book. Nervous at the same time, because you never know what's going to happen with it, but I really hope it's a book that can have a big impact on the world. So you'll be hearing about that this year. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with my Bevan episode. I want to say a big thank you to the patrons. If you aren't a patron, go to Bevan James Eyles podcast, support me, go through the process, and that way you can support the show. And other than that, rock on, have an awesome couple of weeks, and as I always say, keep being you.